So in addition to some of the things that I was talking about in the last lesson, I actually want to show you how these color primaries are working, because this is something that's going to become very important in future lessons on topics of color management and color proofing. When we're dealing with RGB, we're dealing with these three primaries. So if I give it full red and no green and no blue, this is my red primary color. And if I give it full green with no other colors, this is my green primary. And if I give it full blue with no other colors, this is my blue primary. These form the extremes of what's known as the RGB color gamut. And the color gamut, like I said, is just a fancy word that describes what's going on within the more or less triangular shape that's defined by these three colors. Now, when we're dealing with print, we're dealing with these primaries, which you can see at the beginning of our Pantone process coded color chip set. So I'm going to go over here and get my cyan primary, which is sort of a dull bluish color. Our magenta primary, this is going to be useful for generating most of our warmer colors. Our yellow primary, which in conjunction with these other two can produce greens and oranges. And then we have a color that's not really a color, which is black. And so we have C for cyan, M for magenta, Y for yellow, and K for black, CMYK. These four colors form sort of a rectangular shape gamut. And the corners of this rectangle are not going to necessarily line up with the corners of this more saturated triangle. And the main reason why these two things come into conflict is because when we're working in the computer, we're basically always working in RGB. RGB is what's known as an additive color space. And this additive color space is going to always add up to white when you add these three colors together. Whereas with our subtractive color space, which is what we'd be printing with CMYK, when we add these four colors together, we end up with what's known as rich black, which is intensely rich velvety black, which you use when you're trying to get the blackest black that you can possibly print. Now, the bottom line here of all of this is that you need to understand that when we're picking colors with our color picker, or we're choosing and working with color libraries, that we're basically ultimately trying to decide, are we trying to work on our monitor? Are we trying to produce for the web per se, or for video where RGB is going to be king? Or are we trying to work for print? And those will determine the types of color choices that you make and the types of processes that you use. And this is the reason why I was recommending that you use the Pantone process coded, because all of the colors that are available in here are basically made from these four primaries. Even though they'll be displayed on your screen from these three primaries, the transition will be handled by Coreal Painter into a format that will be printable using these four. Now, I know that that sounds incredibly complex to somebody who's never dealt with those topics before, but trust me that it's going to get even more complex, and you have to understand the concept of these three primaries basically have to be converted to these four primaries in order to print. Now, that said, we're going to go ahead now and finish off these color set libraries by getting rid of our Pantone process chips here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Remove Color Set. Now, remember we get that really scary warning when we click OK that says we're going to be permanently deleting it from Painter? Well, that's true and it's not. We go ahead and say yes, and it's going to delete it from this workspace. However, if we go back over to Import, we go to Color Sets, we go to Pantone, you'll find that it's right there, Pantone process coded, just like it was before. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that scary sounding dialogue. The only time that that dialogue is actually accurate is if you haven't saved it out, but all these are already saved, so there's no harm in just getting rid of them by saying remove. Now I want to go back and I'm going to go and reveal my Painter colors. And let's go ahead and look at some of these other options that are available to us in this list. So we have the color set library view, and we have small, medium, large, and list. So we've already looked at list. And then we also have a couple of other options here. We have rename color and show all hidden items. Well, what does show all hidden items refer to? Because we don't see another command here for hiding an item. Well, there's actually some commands that are available to us when we're working with these color sets that are not necessarily always obvious. And the way that we get to them is by clicking on the color chip that we're interested in working with, and then context clicking it to reveal a little context menu. And a context click, by the way, if it's not immediately obvious, is going to be a right mouse button click if you're using a mouse. However, since we're using most likely a Wacom tablet, we're going to be using a button that's going to be assigned to a right mouse button click. So I call it a context click because that's really what it is. So we can choose to hide the color, we can choose to rename the color, and we can choose to delete the color. Well, these two we can choose anywhere, but the hide color is unique to this little list. So if I say hide color, that color is now hidden. It's no longer visible. If I go back over here and I choose Color Set Library View, I can choose to show all hidden items. And now that color is back. So we can really whittle this down without actually deleting the colors from the set. Now, as I said, if you see here, you can also rename any particular color, but why they have it over here, I don't know, because it's a whole lot easier just to rename the color by context clicking on it and saying rename color. Here we can name the color anything we want to name. And of course, this becomes really valuable to us when we're doing a search, because when we're searching, one of the things that we can do is we can search by name. So we could type in, say, silver, and we would end up with that color being selected. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because we're not necessarily going to search right now. The other thing that we can do here is we can work with sorting the order. Now, let me go ahead and load a custom set here so that we can sort the order, and you can see in something that may be a little bit more kind of confusing as it comes in by default. We're going to choose this Windows default 256 colors. Now this is a really ugly, hideously ugly color set by default. I mean, it really is. It's nasty looking. And this is the way that Windows used to you only used to be able to see these colors in Windows back when I first started with Photoshop. This was the only colors that you could work with was 256 colors. And believe you me, the artwork that was made back in those days was truly awe-inspiringly awful. But these were the colors that we had to work with, and I want to go back to the old days and create a painting that only has those colors in it, right? I mean, why would I want to do that? I don't know, but let's say I do. But I don't really know how to find the colors that I'm looking for with the way that this is ordered. So what I can do is I can come over here and I can choose the sort order, and I can choose HLS, LHS, or SHL. What this is basically saying is that it's going to order the color set by hue first, then lightness, then saturation, or by lightness first, then hue, then saturation, or by saturation first, then hue, then lightness. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we'll go hue first. So now we're organizing it by, say, all the reds are together, all the greens are together, all the blues are together. If we come over here now and we choose this order of lightness first, then you'll see all the lightest colors are at the bottom and all the darkest colors are at the top. If we choose the sort order of saturation first, you'll see that all the most saturated colors are at the bottom and all of the least saturated colors, meaning the grayest colors, will be at the top. And so we have different ways that we can quickly sort through one of these custom sets that we have, whether it be something we custom made or whether it's something that we imported, by simply going to the sort order and choosing a sort order that makes sense to us. I tend to work in hue, lightness, saturation, which is this first one right here, more often than not. Now, if you want to save that out, meaning that we're going to export that color set, it will export this as the saved sort order. So you can see saved is our first option right here. Whatever the exported order was when it was exported, that will be the sort order. Now you can manually order these around by simply clicking and dragging them around, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. That pretty much covers most of these things except for this one item right here, which is import legacy color. Now, what is a legacy color set? Well, this will be if you're using color sets from really old versions of Painter that haven't been converted to use the new color set format. You can import them in this way right here. So that's a special little dialog for just that purpose.